quick.
This is Pam, and I'm hearing background noise that sounds like water running.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm not.
So let's practice. So I'm going to mute everybody.
Right.
And clear it out. So in order to
Carrie,
get back,
can I ask you a quick follow-up on the? Can I ask you a quick follow-up on the recording? Is the chat also then recorded because it's video recording as well?
So the answer to that question, this is Scott, I'll answer it, is that this group chat is a part of that recording. And so what will be captured in that group chat will be a part of what could be viewed at a later time.
Thanks.
Right. And so Ruth, I'm gonna drop out of view, and since you guys are at start time, notice you do have 2 new dial-in users that haven't announced, so you might want to probe those ending in 44 and 28. And if you have any technical difficulties and need me, you know how to text me on my cell phone, and I'll come back on. Okay.
all right.
All right. Appreciate it. Glad I could help this morning, everyone. Y'all have a wonderful meeting.
Nice meeting you.
So a couple of housekeeping things for this meeting. There are 2 buttons I want you to find before we dive in. One is the microphone next to your name, or the microphone at the top bar of your screen. You control whether you are muted or unmuted, unless I mute everybody all at once. And if I mute everybody all at once to get rid of background noise, you click on that microphone and you can unmute yourself. No more 2 pound. That's all you got to know. That's what the microphone is for. The other button I want you to find is the little bubble with 2 lines in it, because that's the chat. For the Teams version, we only have public chat for this meeting, not private chat. As Scott just said, it's part of the meeting recording. If you would do 2 things. One, type in your name and your affiliation. Again, we're using it as our virtual sign-in sheet. We have Josh with us today, who's new on the team taking notes. And he doesn't have the benefit of having met all of you. So you're going to help him out a whole bunch if you type your name and your affiliation in the chat. We'll also use chat to keep people in queue, to make sure that I remember to call on you so you can ask your question or share your ideas. We are not going to use the raise hand function. So if you know what that is, please don't use it. If you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. And finally, my last logistical request is, when you speak, because Joshua doesn't know you and he doesn't recognize your voices yet, would you please remind him that this is Steve speaking, or Tom speaking, or Chris speaking? We have some new requirements in your meeting summaries to attribute things to people, and telling Joshua who you are is going to make that a little bit easier. So, Gary, do you have anything else that we've got to do or say?
No, I think as we get going along, first off, I want to thank everybody in advance for your grace, because as we continue with this transition to street legal industries, we're still working out some kinks in the background. So things aren't going to be as smooth as during this meeting and probably the next couple of meetings until we get everything completely smoothed out. However, if there's something that you think we need to know, send Ruth and me a note, and we will take a look at it, because we want this experience to be as good as we can possibly be. Also, another thing that for housekeeping on there was a question, actually a best practices that was listed in recent HAB advice about virtual meetings, and that was about closed captioning. That is a user preference, and up at the top bar where you see the three little dots next to each other, there's a drop down on there that allows you to select live captions. And that may help with some of the conversation, but that's a user preference. It's not a, we can't do that up at the Uber level. So if you have trouble understanding some things, that might be a thing that will help you out. As far as that, I think that from an administrative point, I think we're ready to kick it to you, Tom, and let you go through the normal formal opening and just start following the agenda. That's all I have for now.
Thanks, Gary. I just want to welcome everybody to the River and Plateau Committee meeting. Thanks for showing up. It's important work that we do, and we can't do it without you showing up. We have a lot of discussions that are on the book for today, and they're important work, even though we're not getting a whole bunch of new information. What we talk about today is really going to set the tone for the next HAB year, and I think they're conversations worth having. So we have a packed morning. I guess we should kick it off with the welcome from our DDFO, Stan Branch.
Stan, you're on the phone, right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so good morning and welcome to the April 2021 Hanford Advisory Board River and Plateau Committee meeting. My name is Stan Branch. I'm the Deputy Designated Federal Officer for the Hanford site. As a reminder, this meeting is conducted in accordance with the requirements of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Advisory committees have played an important role in shaping programs and policies of the federal government. The Hanford Advisory Board's role is to provide policy level advice and recommendations concerning the following EM-specific issues, such as cleanup activities and environmental restoration, waste and nuclear fuel, waste and nuclear management and disposition, excess facilities, future land use and long-term stewardship, risk management, and communication. I appreciate your attendance today and look forward to the HAB River and Plateau Committee meeting development and submission of constructive, actionable policy level advice for the Hanford cleanup. As you know, we have a pretty packed agenda today, so I look forward to a productive and good meeting and positive feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Stan. I do want to, just for the folks who haven't been on the board for long or wanted a refresher, the list that's on the screen is from the EMS SAB charter. And there are other documents which also sort of tell us what we can and can't talk about and how the board operates. As you drill down just a little bit, there's the EMS SAB process and procedures desk reference, which has this list, but also adds technology discussions. And in addition to risk management, it's risk assessment, which is important for RAP and Tankways, the two technical committees. We're allowed to discuss new technologies and the like. Drilling a little further, you get to the Memorandum of Understanding, which is specific to just the Hanford Advisory Board. And that document also brings in the ability to discuss the tri-party agreement. and that we can provide advice for not just DOE, but all three tri-party agencies. So we are an independent board. We have the ability to do a little bit more than what's on the slide. It's a very good ground rule, but I'm going to go ahead and paste the links to those two documents in the chat so you have time to review them on your own. The introduction of the EMS SAB desktop manual talks about what the EMS SAB boards can talk about. And then section C of the Memorandum of Understanding talks about what the HAB can talk about. So those links should be in chat now. Okay, so next on the agenda, I've got approval of the February 2021 meeting summary. So that should have all hit your inboxes with this meeting invite last week. Does anyone have any comments? I see Liz.
Morning, this is Liz Matson with Hanford Challenge. I just noticed, Ruth, that Pam speaks in the meeting or is in the summary, but not on the list of participants at the end. And so I thought it would be worth just pulling it up. And if there's anyone else who remembered who is there that's not on the list, you can just take a look right now. It happens every once in a while just because Ruth has to use the chat list of people signing in. So I always go there first. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. I noticed that too.
Hence my begging you to sign in.
Pam, were you just seconding Liz's comment, or did you have another?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone object to approving the meeting summary as amended? Well, we're ahead of schedule.
Okay, where are we? That's okay. Ahead of schedule can work. Are there announcements that anybody needs to make? Actually, I probably should make an announcement. The new facilitation contract started on April 1st, no fooling. We're gonna have, the company Street Legal is located in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. They also provide facilitation services for the Oak Ridge Board, which runs a little bit differently than the HAB. The team, when we are all together, there'll be 3 of us. Josh is with us today. He's actually the technical writer on the project. So he's part-time on the project, but this week he's full-time because our admin, who is Nancy, won't be joining the team until next Monday on the 19th. It's a bit of a timing thing about when the contract happened and 2 weeks notice to her current employer. So we will have an admin who speaks Hanford. We will have Josh, who's the technical writer. The Hanford Library, the office is moving from the little office back behind the piano store in Richland, down by the post office, to the offices of RC Engineering and Construction. RC Engineering's offices are out by the Best Western on George Washington Way. The manager there is Jody. So Josh and Nancy are actually working for Jody, and we're in the process of doing that moving thing. So that's the local office. The local office has, in addition to the files, there's a conference room, a place, table, chairs where small numbers of people can meet and talk. And you're still stuck with me. So that's the cast of characters. We're in the process of getting things like phone numbers and emails set up, and that should shake out a little bit better on Monday when Nancy is here. So if you need to reach us for any reason right now, the best thing to do is to send me an email at ruthnicholson@slind.net. SLIND stands for Street Legal Industries. That's what that is. Chris, you've got a question. Do you? I thought I heard you. I saw you waving at us. Okay. Forgot to unplug the phone.
Ruth, I do have a question. It's Shelley Simone.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. Is the meeting room large enough for us to have issue manager meetings there? Is that a possibility? How large are they?
So, Joshua, I'm going to put you on the spot because I've not seen the space, but Joshua's office is there.
There are 2 meeting spaces, each with full-size conference tables, one of which is private with a door that can be closed for private meetings. So we'll have to wipe. Sorry, what?
How many chairs?
I would guess you could probably fit 10 people around one of these conference tables.
Pre-COVID.
Great. And this is an open building to the public.
Yeah, we have an actual office location and staffed Monday through Friday.
Okay, thanks so much.
So I think one of the rooms has a whiteboard at least.
Yes, the private conference room does.
Okay. So the plan is that the office is open Monday through Thursday. We're looking at working 4/10s. And if you need it on Fridays, let us know and we can open it by appointment. So the answer is yes on Fridays, but please let us know so somebody comes in to let you in.
Okay, any more announcements?
This is Steve Wigman. I have a question. I'm not used to meetings being recorded, and I'm curious, are all meetings now going to be recorded, or is this a different way of documenting a meeting? What's the go forward plan for recording?
Gary?
Steve, this is Gary. The intent is, because these are public meetings, we'll be recording board meetings and committee meetings. IM team meetings for now will not be recorded because you're not actually doing public business during an IM call. And we're looking at what we're going to do for executive issue committee calls. But for now, committees and board meetings will be recorded.
Thank you.
And incidentally, many of the other citizen advisory boards are doing this. They're posting meetings on their websites, on YouTube, things like that. We're just taking the step forward with the HAB to kind of join the rest of the citizen advisory boards as well.
Are we going to record committee meetings? I mean, not committee meetings. So one of the stepped up documentation pieces in addition to recording is we're now going to do meeting summaries for full board meetings, committee meetings, and committee calls. The committee calls, we historically haven't had their own set of meeting notes. Are we going to record committee calls as well?
TBD, probably not the calls, because the calls are typically not public. But the committee meeting itself will be. I'll have to get a read on that, but as of now, like I said, the intent is not to record calls.
Announcement for those of you who missed the email. The Tank Waste Committee meeting, which was scheduled for tomorrow, has been canceled. There's no Tank Waste Committee meeting tomorrow. The next event this week is the Executive Issues Committee call on Thursday at 10 a.m. And we will make sure you get the right links and call-in numbers. I've got Liz and Bob in queue. Liz, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. This is Liz Matson. I heard earlier someone say that the meetings might be posted on the public record. Does that mean they'll be posted at hanford.gov with the committee meeting summary as a YouTube file? How's that going to be handled? Does anyone know?
Liz, this is Gary, and the intent is that this file will be placed unedited along the other files for meetings on hanford.gov.
All right. I have Bob and Shelley in queue. Bob?
Yes. This is Bob Suyama, Benton County. Liz's question was the same as mine. I was just wondering how you can get to them and can everybody get to them? And it sounds like we can.
Shelley.
Thanks, Ruth. Hi, everybody. I'm dropping back in after being gone a month, dealing with family biz, and so I'm playing catch up right now. But I'm curious about why the Tank Waste Committee meeting was canceled. DOE committed to us as a board trainings, tutorials on different facets of the site, of cleanup, of moving from startup to operations, and so on, and doing these at each of our committee meetings to bring new board members up on board and to help the rest of us get our feet under us as we look at what's going on with bringing direct feed low activity waste online. Where is that? And why are we not seeing that? And why is that not enough to drive one piece of a committee meeting? I'm wondering about that. We also have the forums for each committee meeting where we can talk amongst ourselves and not particularly have a topic that needs to be discussed. So it seems that in this time, we should be doing as much training as possible and educating of our board members as to where we are with things that are going on site. So Bob, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yes.
If, Gary wants to, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes, the decision to cancel the Tank Waste Committee was mine. Basically, we had two topics that were not time critical: the retrieval of the AN or the AX 105 and 106 tanks, and the immobilized low activity waste transporter that were basically just informational. And the committee hadn't asked for those type of discussions. What we had asked for was a discussion of the GAO report, of the tank integrity that we were working on. And there just wasn't time when that agenda was going to come out, which was Monday, to send out those reports for people to review, because the GAO report was actually going to be one of the first, I don't know what Jeff Burbright calls it, the gazebo or the book report, but it was a internal HAB Tank Waste Committee discussion of the GAO report without DOE or any of the tri-party agencies. And without getting those documents in the hands of the Tank Waste Committee meetings prior to the meeting, I just didn't think that we were going to be able to have a productive discussion. So I elected to move it to next month, and we will be sending out all those documents ahead of time so people can read them and we can have a better discussion of the GAO findings and the path forward for the tank integrity advice that the issue manager group's been working on. So I just didn't think it was worth the committee, and I'm not sure how the contract's set up, but it would be another committee meeting that may count as against our group of committee meetings for the year. So I voted to put it off and make sure we get everything lined up so we can have a productive meeting. So Shelley, it was my decision.
Bob, I really appreciate hearing you talk about that and say that. I think this is something we need to add to the EIC committee meeting and possibly the leadership committee meeting also, is that how do we build in a timely fashion these meetings so that they are meaningful? And I really appreciate you're not having the meeting just to have a meeting, you know, that we do get results from it. That's incredibly important. And but also at the same time, it really demands that we start to get everything, and we being the collective, the regulatory agencies, DOE, and us, so we get our ducks in order for getting these meetings and agendas out in a timely way, and the information out so that folks can read it and start accomplishing what DOE had said they were hoping to accomplish, which was to bring everyone that's new and everyone that's on our board up to speed with where we are on site in a real open, you know, transparent way. So thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. And I'd like to see that added to our EIC discussions when we have them. Thanks.
Yes, and I totally agree with Shelley.
We do have some time to talk about all this this afternoon.
Okay.
The sort of what's working and what isn't in the HAB is on the agenda for this, not this afternoon, late this morning, I guess. It's a short meeting. And with that in mind, we are sort of cutting into the IM team's presentation time. I want to make sure we get time to run that to ground, since that's really the meat of the conversation. So if we can hold off towards open forum and committee business for this type of conversation, that would be great.
Right. So one last thing before we move to M91 and Vince Pinesco's clean desk. I'm so jealous. There's a question from Esteban, and Gary, help us understand. We've been sharing committee meeting information with people who are in the HAB packet and are not yet appointed. Gary, what's the direction for how we how folks who are not yet appointed participate in committee meetings? Help me with that.
Yes, as of now, folks who are prospective members, and Esteban, you're one, are treated as public, which means that typically during public discussion, that's where questions and comments and things like that would come in. We don't have a public comments section listed on this agenda. However, Tom, with your permission, if you would allow public questions during that time, we can ask that public comment is added as part of that.
Yeah, let's just make sure that we note that they're not, and just so you're aware, folks who aren't on the board yet, this is called being at the table, in air quotes. And there's a whole set of procedures that decide who's at the table. So let's make sure that we include that discussion. Maybe we can fit it in between open forum and committee discussion. Unless it's pertinent to a topic, and then just maybe in queue, right, when you add yourself to the queue and chat, say public, and that way it's noted.
Right. So I was just wondering what to do with Esteban, because he's asked to be in queue.
Yeah, so I think that that's fine, as long as just when you have a question, if you're not at the table, quote unquote, just say question public, and that way we know you're not speaking from the board.
All right.
So yeah, go ahead, Esteban.
So
Welcome,
was that
by
my
the way.
cue to try it out, question in public since
Oh, yeah, we're recorded, so we know you're in the public. And welcome to the wrap, by the way.
But
Nice to meet
I'll just, being conscious of like Tom's comments and, time and like Dick and Shelley and being effective, I'll just leave because I did watch the whole open forum, time and stuff. So I'll just, if I can, I'll just, ask during the open forum my question.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I will make that note. All right. What do you feel about M91?
Well, I just want to thank the issue manager team for their work on this. We have a plethora of information to learn, and without further ado, I guess, Vince, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. First of all, I want to be sure that you can hear me. Is that correct?
You're good.
Okay. I was asked, or maybe I volunteered, to look at the previous Hanford advice on M91. And I thought that was a pretty easy job because I could just spend an hour or two going back through the 300 or so HAB advice back 20 years and picked out about 12 past HAB advice, which dealt with the topic that M91. And in summary, what the HAB has said over the last 20 years is, number one, we want all of the TRU removed from Hanford. We don't want any plutonium waste left at Hanford. Number two, we think, again, this is HAB advice, that M91 is only a part of the iceberg, is the tip of the iceberg, and we want more global continuity. Meaning, how does M91 work with all the other milestones? What's happened, and I have to keep this brief because the 200 areas have been chopped up into OUs, different operating units, different burial grounds. There's 24 different total burial grounds, but waste treated and classified differently. And M91 is just a part of that. And how it fits holistically is a big issue and a question mark when you just, and what I discovered, if you were just anybody on the HAB is going to pick up the February version, the tentative version of M91, it's like opening up a book in the middle of the book. You're starting to read and you have no understanding of what's happened in the first half of the book. And there's been a great deal of work between DOE and ecology over the last 20 years. Tremendous amount of work, energy put into defining M91. And for somebody who's just picking up the milestone today, it's pretty confusing. And there's lots of terminology that we don't understand, logic that we wouldn't understand, and you don't appreciate the amount of work that's been done over the last 2 decades on this subject. So I discovered that right off the bat, you needed to understand scope and definitions. And that's what my talk today, my presentation is going to be focused on scope, definition, and then the interesting thing, the last part and the most important part of the conversation will be the fact that M91 has a plan, has a requirement to put out an annual project management plan, which tells how M91 will be implemented. And that's where the focus has to be in the future here. When I started this thing, I didn't even know there was a project management plan existed. And I've been on the Hanford Advisory Board for a number of years, and it's amazing how many of these annual reports that occur that we don't even know about. and they're very important. Well, anyhow, I got to stay focused and get through this quickly. So, number one here on the scope. The scope is on topics, and M91 is retrievably stored waste. The focus, well, okay, why this is important is that the previous HAB advice wandered beyond M91. It wasn't focused. It was get all the TRU out and get the global continuity, which if you're the people working on M91, you're restricted to a narrow scope. And let's focus on what that narrow scope is. That narrow scope is bullet number 1, as on your screen, removal of the retrievably stored waste. We'll get to the definition in a minute. And it includes mixed low-level waste, and what another term that, now how that got in here, I don't know. That's, we will, if we had a presentation from the people who've been involved, I thought this was just on transuranic. And you will see now new terminology, TRUM, for transuranic mixed. So they decided to put the mix at the end of TRU, where it's low-level waste, the M goes in front. Again, this is a historical development, which it is what it is. And when these milestones are completed, DOE will successfully have treated the mixed low-level waste, which treated means treated, and they didn't use the word disposed. It would be disposed, but it could be at Hanford. It's not shipped off-site, but the shipment off-site, it focuses on TRU. So that's relatively consistent. And this would be the end of my presentation would be, yeah, you look at the Hanford advice, M91 is consistent with previous Hanford advice. End of presentation, we can go on another topic. But there's a lot of things we need to talk about that I learned. So let's move on to the bottom of this. Ruth, can you scan down? The scope includes above ground storage as of June 30th, 2009. I don't know why that date is important, but I do know that there's in a lot of the Hanford advice, previous advice was at the Central Waste Complex and T-Plant and the RAP. There was lots of storage of mixed low-level waste that had to be moved and analyzed in this stuff. And by the way, WHIP was shut down. They had a couple of incidents there. I'd love to talk to you about it. I don't have time. And one of the pushbacks DOE made over the last couple of years is, hey guys, we can't be forced to meet a milestone when we're dependent on other people off-site. If the RAPS facility, the WHIP facility, Carlsbad, is shut down, Department of Energy at Hanford, they have no control over that. And so holding them responsible for WHIP's performance was, in DOE's viewpoint, unacceptable. And so there's been a discussion on that. What surprised me on the M91 is M91 only applies to retrievable stored waste in 4 burial grounds. And this is burial grounds that receive TRU material after May 6, 1970. Okay, only 4. So, and by the way, not just all of those 4, just scattered amongst those 4. In one of those burial grounds, I think it's 4B, there's only 2 trenches out of the large number of trenches that had TRU material in. Let's go on to the next slide. We go this. What was kind of puzzling is, what is retrievable stored waste? Now they call it retrievably stored, and as defined in the milestone, it's waste that was believed to meet TRU criteria when it was placed in one of those 4 burial grounds after May 1970. And what if it and we waste after 1970 was supposed to be retrievable at that point. And if it's not retrievable, if the container that was put in has ruptured or corroded, which a number of them did, they're going to leave them there. It's a risk to workers to move, and this whole process of how you separate that, if it's too risky to take this stuff out of the ground, it's not called, doesn't fall into the definition of RSW, and the path forward would be the circle process or the RECLA process, mostly circle processes for closure of that, which would require additional remediation. So let's go down to the next point. This information here, let's see. Yeah, this is we need to talk. Yeah, that's the four important dates. This is really important. These 4 dates are important. And I worked in the laboratories. I've been associated with the project for over 58 years, and I worked there in the 60s and up to 70s. And so look at what pre-1970 TRU waste is: waste with known or detectable contamination of transuranics. Well, what that meant was any waste that came out of -5 or Pyrrhic, anywhere that we had a plutonium facility where they were doing, and T plant had a plutonium processing plutonium, B plant, 231Z, every scrap of waste from that building was considered contaminated with TRU. So if you can, and we buried them in cardboard boxes. And the plastic line, you threw them in the cardboard box. And you have to understand that this is something you really need to remember all your lives. Production was the key back in the 40s and 50s, when this 20-some years, and we didn't have any measurement abilities. We didn't know how much plutonium was going in those boxes. We knew because we were handling it, that it was under criticality levels. But if you had a pump that failed on the processing line, you had to get that pump out as fast as you could, get another pump in there, because you wanted that process line to keep going. And if you had something fouled up on the process, which it did from time to time, and you had material that wasn't, you threw it in the cardboard, you bagged it out of the glove box, you threw it in the cardboard box. And this included stuff that you brought in. In the laboratories, there'd be glass, there'd be bottles of solutions. You'd have excess, we'd be working the glove boxes, and you'd have acids, bottles of acid and stuff like that. You bag them out, throw them in there. So there's liquids in there as well, organics, and I've got some other stories. If we have time, I'll tell you, because there's more in there than people understand. Okay, cardboard boxes taken out the burial grounds, thrown in off the boxes. There's a tossed in, and then a bulldozer would scoop dirt over the top of this. The bulldozer would get contaminated from time to time, and they'd come out with, they have a tank truck with water sitting there, and you just hose the bulldozer off, and it'd go on, continue working later. They talk about, well, our burial grounds are dry. Well, yeah, how many times did they hose the bulldozer off with water right into the burial grounds? And so the burial grounds weren't all entirely dry, and if you had leaks, and all this glassware of solutions and things we put in there were smashed by the bulldozer, and including high concentrations of nuclear waste, which is a story I'll get into a little later.
So Vince,
yes,
a couple of translations, because I know we've got some new folks here. Is -5 the plutonium finishing plant?
Plutonium finishing plant, yes.
Okay. And
that's where we took the liquid from Purex, plutonium nitrate from Purex, precipitated in an oxalate, and converted it into metal, and made metal shapes. And the waste from this material, and particularly if we had problems with it, would go into these boxes. And so, okay.
So Pam has a question too before we jump to bullet 2. Pam?
Go.
Okay, so Vince, I just think for people that may be new to this discussion, the 1970 distinction is important, because the federal law in 1970 defined what transuranic waste was. So waste that was generated before 1970 didn't have parameters. And so after 1970, it's treated differently. I just wanted to share that. And it's, Vince, your personal experience is so valuable to us. I really appreciate your doing this. Thank you.
Well, I've got more stories on that, but well, I want to wait until afterwards, and so if I have time. But okay, so after, in March 1970, the ruling came out that you had to put the waste in something containers that would be retrieved within 20 years. And so in this case, it was 55-gallon drums. So we switched from cardboard boxes to 55-gallon drums. And the initial use at that time, then you'd stack the drums, but they didn't have covers and things like that, so that they just filled it with dirt initially. And so a lot of those initial drums that were put in were corroded and weren't protected. And as we're finding now, some of them have corroded and aren't even considered RW. Okay, in RSW. Okay, and this is something I didn't really, I discovered here, 1973, the limit, so they operated with 3 years. You have to remember, we didn't have equipment to measure what's inside the 55-gallon drums. We didn't have any idea what was in there. In the development of analytical equipment that you could put around a box or a drum at that time, to determine what's inside was just getting started in the 70s, early 70s. And so in 1973, the limit was 10 nanocuries per gram. And then that got changed in 1982 to 100 nanocuries. So anything over 100 nanocuries per gram goes to WIP and is considered TRU, anything under. So there's a lot of material that's buried between 1973 and 1982 that is under 100 nanocuries per gram in the TRU. So I think what the bottom line here of these 4 bullets is that there are a lot of material that's probably not considered today to be TRU. So there's a lot of sorting that's going to be required. Let's move on to the next topic. I'm the contact one, 200 elements per hour for a definition of contact, because there's for people that need to understand, contact handled is under 200 MR per hour is a pretty high rate. You can burn yourself out within under an hour. You get your dose for the week, which is around 100 gram, I believe. It used to be at least one time. Okay, let's move on to the next one, because this is where the more important part. What you learned is that the M91 is implemented by the project management plan. We're just going to call it the PMP. And this is the last issue was September 2020. And it has 8 sections. And we're going to, these sections address how M91 is implemented. Let's go to section 3. We'll come back to section 2 later, but let's look at section 3 and 4. I'm going to quickly go over what these 3 sections talk about is when, and it's consistent with the previous presentation that the last meeting we had that talked about WIP, deadline shipping to WIP, moving from 2030 to 2050. Now remember that 2050 is the new date, and M91 implements that new date of 2050 shipment of all retrievably stored waste, which is defined as plutonium waste, to WIP by 2050. Okay, and if you see here, the dates they have, the first bullet, milestone 49, complete to contact, shipment of contact RSW by 2039. complete removal of remote handled, the next bullet, milestone 49B, the remote handled retrievably stored waste by 2048. And what's interesting and a little puzzling too is that the original volume there is 15,000 cubic meters, more or less, and they've retrieved approximately 12,700 cubic meters and approximately 2,600 or so, 3,000 cubic meters left. Well, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, let's keep going. Section 4 talks about short-term certifying and treating the TRU waste. And so the milestone gives you, M91 gives you these little year by year volume things. So let's go to section 5. Next slide. Section 5 gives you these dates, certification in 2026, 2028, shipment 61, 62, milestone 48 says complete offsite shipment or retrieval of TRU by 2050. And that's pretty much consistent with previous HAB advice. So, so that's, that's okay. That's again, the previous HAB advice said get rid of TRU, and M91 is only for RSW, and it says right here that's what the goal is. By 2050, it's out, it's gone, the RSW portion. Well, we're looking at section 6, storage capacity. That's been an issue. The HAB device said you've got all this material building up, you're not getting this being stored out there, and you get rid of it. And if you get down at the bottom of section 6, it says milestone 58, 59 rather, is remove all mixed waste containers from OSA is outside storage areas by 2026. And so you can see that that part is being addressed as well. So, okay, there's 2 areas now that, let's go back to section 2. If we scroll up, this is in the PMP. You can look up this up. It's and the references of this document have all kinds of connections to other documents. The acquisition of necessary capabilities. Well, we got 2 problems inherent here. The current retrievably stored waste is 55-gallon drums stored on asphalt pads, and so you can uncover now they're covered with tarps and things, and plywood, separated with plywood and stuff like that. But you've got 2 other kinds of TRU waste. You've got caissons where waste was highly radioactive, true, that was dumped in there because of the high radiation that they're buried. Getting those out is going to be a challenge. And we faced that with the burial grounds north of the 300 area with that as well. And so, but you can see, okay, and then in addition to 55-gallon drums, we got big containers. We've got glove boxes and stuff that are buried in big wooden containers and steel containers, a lot of process equipment. So you can see that we need another facility to handle these difficult wastes. And so you'll see terminology. This talks about a contact CH facility. If you notice these milestones, 58, 55, 56, 54, identify, and so let's see, by 50, and it's a little bit confusing in a way if you look, because see, milestone 56, there is a 90% final design for a contact handled. By 2026, milestone 54 talks about identifying facilities by 2028. So, in terms of the dates and stuff, you have to talk to the people that worked on this to understand why these and explain these dates, because, you just open this up and you see this, you don't understand it. What's notable, though, is that there's been previous milestones. This is the first part of the book, that when you open up the middle of the book, you discover that, well, there's been some studies already looked at all of the various options. And so these two studies, I'm showing down here the alternate evaluation and engineering alternate studies on there. You can web to those. You can, if you go to the PMP reference section, you'll find those documents, and you'll find a list of. They have all kinds of different options of how to handle remote handled and large package processing options. And so we've got to move on. Time. We can't get into any details here. Other that's something that I think is important for this committee to look at Section 2 in these documents later on as a follow-up to this meeting. So that's one of two follow-ups. Let's go to Section 7.
Sorry.
Section 7 is important because one of our milestones, in fact, the most recent one, 2015, was concerned about this, what we call global continuity from the HAB device. And Section 7 actually of the PMP gets into discussing that by listing all that global continuity, by listing all the other circuit closure activities that are, let's see, well, okay, I don't see that right now, that are going to, let's continue. I'm gonna find, no, not gonna find it. You've got plutonium in Purex. You got plutonium in some of the facilities in B plant. You got the ecology site has plutonium in it, which U.S. Ecology has plutonium. So you have in tank farms. So there's all this TRU waste that's covered by other milestones, not M91. And so as far as this other waste, DOE has responded to the HAB concern about global continuity by trying to point out in Section 7, see Section 7, all this other, it has nothing to do with M91. This is the circuit cleanup action that's surrounding, it's the rest of it's the global continuity portion that the HAB was concerned about. I'm sure that it's probably not as thorough as we want it, might want it, but this is a topic for follow-up. The two topics are follow-up, and that's the conclusion of my presentation, so we can get into questions. Is the number one, the new facilities, they're going to have to be built to finish getting all of the retrievable stored waste to WIP by 2050, the new facilities and what they need to be. And then number two, the follow-up topic is this global continuity. What all this other TRU waste is going to come in from these circular processes. And we talk about, oh, well, yeah, if it's high enough, it'll go to WIP. If it's below the cutoff point, then we send it to URF, and that's a topic for future consideration. So, in summary, then, I think M91 is the milestones as they're written now is responsive to HAB concerns. It may not go as fast as far as we want, but I think that these are the follow-up topics of the new facilities are going to be built to handle the difficult remote handled and the difficult large pieces of equipment, and then the other waste material from circular cleanup actions. And I'll give you just a taste, one last thing, and I'll end my presentation because I've gone over time. Is that one of the largest areas where there's plutonium is in the tank waste. And I came across a document 10 years ago or so that just made the statement that there's something like over 800 kilograms of plutonium in the sludge of 20 tanks. And I'm assuming those are all single shell tanks. But somehow this sludge is going to be recovered, dried out, and shipped to WIP. Interesting. How's that going to happen? I haven't seen anybody address that. So again, these are things that for the rep to be looking at in the future, and it's outside of M91. But so that ends my presentation, and I'd like to take any questions you had.
We've got questions. So I have Tom, Cecilia, and Shelley in queue. Tom?
I just, once again, thanks for this wealth of information, Vince, and getting it all in one place is really helpful. I really am trying to push long-term agenda planning, and I think we should try to have a meeting in the future on sort of a plutonium-themed meeting. We've got PFP demolition still ongoing. We've got the Z-cribs grouting. We could have this project management plan incorporated into it as well, and sort of just, we've got a groundwater theme for October. Maybe we can fit in a plutonium theme also, and then we can get annual updates on the report too. That seems like low-hanging fruit, and the longer lead time we can give the subject matter experts, the better. So I like that idea, and I think it's a great plan.
Shelley, and then Steve Wigman. Shelley?
Here we go.
There you go.
Thanks so much. Vince, thanks so much for this presentation. It's been a long time since I thought about M91 as in a global perspective, and I appreciate you getting us back up to that point. Couple of things I'm thinking about and wondering if you've thought about it as you started to review the M91 milestone and what it covers and its relationship to the rest of the sites or plutonium sites at Hanford. And I'm wondering about the idea of analogous waste sites and the need to actually expand using analogous waste sites and cleanup so that there is continuity to it as you move across the site. We were really lucky when we got the Recovery Act money, and because we were ready with what Tom just called low-hanging fruit, we got a heck of a lot of cleanup done on the river, an amazing amount for that money. And it's because there was planning in advance and things were, as we call it, shovel ready. So I think about the true burial grounds and other sites, and how do we start to coordinate very strategic, what will be very strategic cleanup and have to be, because the 42 miles of burial grounds, we're not going to get it all. We're not going to go into it all, but there are ways of being strategic. And so it begs the question of not just analogous waste sites, but also characterization and the need for characterization and finding funding for that. I am imagining that we will see some hiccups in direct feed low activity law. I hope not, but there's a potential. And so as we have to shift if we have to shift for a while to something else in terms of projects, then I would like to see us be very strategic at this site and focus on looking at analogous waste sites, looking at this global idea of global continuity, and looking at characterization efforts, and maybe elevating that to a higher focus. I don't know how folks feel about that, but I wanted to throw that out there. And if you want to respond, Vince, that'd be great.
Thank you for leading in. This is, one of my additional topics. There's no such thing as these other, what's the terminology again? Of trying to say one waste site is going to be just like another.
Yes,
analogous is the word.
Yes.
Waste is characterized a square foot at a time, an object at a time. There is no uniformity. The variability of waste materials is so huge, and you don't have any concept of what goes into, think of your garbage can at and I think about Richland, where they have you have vegetation, you have recycle, you have garbage, and your pink cans. Pink cans are supposed to be delivered to the site, the burial grounds out there, and set aside as specials. Who's going to do that? They just throw their pink cans into the garbage can. Do people follow instructions? No. They do whatever's convenient, and that's waste. And what went in the burial grounds and the procedures for stuff in the burial grounds was the least followed procedure of anything on the site, because it had the lowest priority. What was priority in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was production. I'll give you one story. The Untitled Lab collected samples from the plutonium facility, operating facility, and we would have plutonium nitrate solutions in there in the lab. And when you're done analyzing those, you throw them in a bottle, and then we had a recycle place where they take bottles of plutonium nitrate, 200 concentrated, 200, 250 gram per liter, take it back to the operations and put it back into this, recycle it back into the operations, except there's times when operations was shut down and we were full. The analytical lab had bottles and bottles of stuff, and so the pressure was to get rid of it. And sometimes people would take these bottles of plutonium nitrate and just throw them in the waste, throw them in one of these cardboard containers. And there's a tremendous amount of plutonium and liquid plutonium in these cardboard containers that were thrown out into the barrel and smashed with a caterpillar bulldozer. And so the same story came through when talking to friends who worked in the fuels thing in the 300 area, where they had so much waste, the waste trucks couldn't pick up. They were generating waste more, so they had what they called rogue burials, where they went across Stevens on the west, across the tracks, and took backhoes and dug holes with pickup trucks and took waste and buried it there. And then there were times when the pickup got so contaminated, they had to take another and drag it out and bury the contaminated pickup there. They found some of those, but same thing, think about the 100 areas where they had fuel rupturing and trying to push fuel out. And they discovered what? They discovered fuel elements in the burial grounds. They're not supposed to be any fuel elements in the burial grounds in the 100 areas. And so what people don't understand today is they don't understand the operating problems they had, both within manufacturing fuel elements in the 300 area of trying to get the reactors and the fuel through there without the fuel elements rupturing in the tubes and stuff, and having to deal with that rupture and the upsets in the reactors at the time. And then you get into the Purex and the upsets, and I can go, I have to stop. But the point is that you had a tremendous amount of variety of material. And the last example I'll give is that, for example, in the burial grounds, they would take failed equipment. You'd take it out. Was all the plutonium nitrate out of the? No, one of the cases where the pump was just dumped in the burial ground, and then plutonium nitrates leaking out onto the ground from the pumps thrown into the burial ground, and they called that an unplanned release. And it was, but many of the times the tanks and processing equipment was thrown out, and the leaking plutonium nitrate into this ground and stuff was not recorded, and just people just covered it up with dirt and went on. So yeah, to characterize a burial ground is, you can try, but good luck on that. And they just wish that the people that are doing sorting now, was more documentation of all the variety of stuff they're finding in that waste. I'll leave it at that.
Right. So I have Steve Wigman, Vince again, and Jerry in queue. And Jerry stepped off for a minute. So let's do Steve and then Vince. We'll watch for Jerry. And then what we want to do as we wrap this up is identify what are the next steps on this topic. It could be for the issue management team. It could be for the committee. What comes next? And looks like Tom Cecilia is thinking about that. Steve Wigman, you're up.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Vince, your knowledge is always so insightful. I really appreciate it. My question really relates to going forward. One of the experiences I've had over the years is that Milestones are not meaningful, and they change, and they always get pushed out. I thought we were going to be done when I was 100, but now I'm going to have to be 200 years old. Point being, is there anywhere a baseline for transuranic activities, and is there a critical path schedule that we could monitor so we can actually see if progress is being made or if we're just heading for more slips? So it's kind of part of the go forward activities associated with this topic. We're going to want to be able to monitor something other than just creeping failure.
Well, that's what section 3, 4, and 5 do. They give you intermediate milestones. And so I think that answers your question. If you just look at, Ruth, do you want to go back to section 3?
No, the question is not milestones. The question is progress toward milestones through a baseline or a critical path schedule.
Well, some of these are yearly schedules. For example, section 4, look at milestone 47T01, treat 280 cubic meters by September 30th of this year. And so then you do the same next year. And so these are little monitored steps, as you say. How do you monitor progress? But again, the whip fire, the two things, shut whip down, and by golly, it's going to happen again. There's this waste they're trying to send down there is got to be free of anything that'll explode or pressurize, and that requires when you got material coming in from all the various DOE sites around the country, and you think everything's going to be perfect in those drums going to whip. That's pretty high expectation. They've been doing a pretty good job. They only had one, to my knowledge, one drum, but maybe more than that now, at whip that had a problem with. So that's not too bad considering thousands of drums that they've taken down there. But Steve, the reality is that you can't schedule handling waste at Hanford, and that was a big mistake that Rockwell Hanford, when they came in. They came in from the bomber program. The B-1 bomber program closed down, and the people from California came up and tried to run cleanup as a project to build an airplane. But when you build an airplane, you've got all the parts. You know what's there. When you handle waste, you don't know what's there. And the burial grounds are the same way. You don't know what's there. You don't know the challenges that you're going to face with digging up, because you don't know what was thrown in these burial grounds. There's surprises, and it's as much as I know the previous HAB advice wanted specific schedules, it's impossible. And that carries over even the GOA report on retrieval, which is another topic. The point is, with handling waste, there's going to be surprises. You can't schedule it like a specific project.
Right. And just to add,
Tom Cecilia?
Yeah, just to add, just because you can't schedule the cleanup because there's so many uncertainties, it doesn't mean that the milestones aren't important. You need to keep the milestones so the task is in mind. Knowing that the milestone is going to slip or there are external forces acting, you have to pencil in a due date. And then you have a reason to say, okay, well, we didn't make the due date and here's why, and do a self-assessment. But I disagree with Steve that milestones aren't important. Maybe I was taking it out of context, but just wanted to jump in there.
I didn't mean to imply that milestones were not important, but the fact has been that we allow them to slip, and we didn't know that they were going to slip until they slipped. And that's where a baseline or a critical path schedule would help us think about what issues have to be dealt with.
Yeah, it would have to be a short-term schedule because there's so many external forces that are, when can we start shipping to WIP is the biggest one.
Okay.
All right. So I'm looking at the clock, and Vince, would it be okay if I jump to some others who've been in the queue and haven't had a chance to talk yet?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I've got Jerry. Jerry, you're back. Good. And Chris Sutton and Pam. Jerry Paulette. Make sure you unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. This was important, and luckily my schedule cleared for 2 hours this morning. Vince, that was incredibly valuable. Thank you so much. I am concerned on two things. One is you did not discuss the timelines and status of the huge volume of stored waste that is illegally stored, uncharacterized, dangerous plutonium liquids have leaked in CWC, and M91 is supposed to be covering those. And I'm very concerned that the board advice and discussions need to include a significant focus on the urgency for removing and treating stored waste, which we've put in our budget advice over and over and over again. And the volume is very high. The risks are very high for the stored wastes, much of which is not characterized. There have been incompatible wastes stored next to one another. There have been leakages. There's waste outside, as we know. And I think that it needs to be a major part of our conversation. And then the second thing is I'm very, very concerned about even the notion of the board accepting that there are what we called 4 islands of retrievable mixed waste in the burial grounds. We know that there is no documentation that was kept. There is no indication at all that those 4 small portions of trenches are the only mixed wastes in the trenches, and it's in fact belied by the groundwater and monitoring data as to whether or not there are chemicals in the other trenches or the rest of those trenches. And so I feel very strongly that we should not be assuming or accepting that it is just 4 little islands in the trenches that are subject to retrieval. Whether or not how that works on schedules, it's a massive project. But
Ruth, could I respond to Jerry?
Please.
Yeah.
Could you go down to 6? Just scan this slide and go down to section 6. Under storage. And so this addresses the outside storage portion. They didn't address inside. So I don't know what that necessarily means, but the OSA is the outside storage. And you see there's supposed to be 10 mixed containers removed every year. And then milestone 59,
we were promised that they'd be removed years ago. They are grossly out of compliance with the compliance schedule that was put in place, and waiting till 26 to remove them for the outside containers is just waiting for disaster. You know, these have leaked. Remember that, folks. These have leaked already. It's illegal to store waste outside. They should never have been outside. And now delaying and saying all we're doing is 10 a year is just ridiculous. And it doesn't deal with the 10 or 11,000 drums and containers inside, right?
Yeah. And
Thank you.
And Ruth, could you go to slide, I believe it's 5?
The slide
picture
5?
of the burial ground.
The picture of the burial ground? Okay.
Yeah, because Jerry brought that up. Islands.
This one?
This is a little higher. Bring it up a little higher yet. I just want to show the red. The red's retrievably stored. And Jerry, this is proves your point. Bring it up even a little more, Ruth.
I don't.
You can't bring it up higher.
It's all it all doesn't.
There you go. That's good right there.
Is this good?
But that's burial ground W3A. And that just shows your point, Jerry, that there's these islands. And what that's going to be interesting because there's holes. They're going to excavate and get retrievable stored waste out of that spot. And then you're left with gaps. So the amount of material left is huge. And this is going forward as to what to do with the rest of this. And so that's in Tom's, in terms of the discussion of what to go forward, is all the rest of this waste. Ruth, could you go down the next slide after that? Real quick, this is going to take a lesson. We want to do this less than a minute. So here's a document, all of the landfills. Just go ahead and just put it up a little more higher.
Okay.
If you can. And just go back. Okay, just look at all the different landfills. There's the pre-70, post-70, some, you see RSW on the left-hand side, but the volume, and then go to the next slide.
Oh, the next one, okay.
Yeah, go to the next one. And the reason I want to show this is just the, okay, the number of trenches down here, totals, 339 trenches. Look at the volume of buried waste. We've got the 450,000 cubic meters. And remember the numbers we showed earlier, we've shipped retrievably stored. The original volume in the burial ground is 15,000, which is just a minuscule part of this. So Jerry, your comment is exactly spot on. Look at the tremendous volume of waste that we've got to deal with compared to the waste we've dealt with. So yeah, I just wanted to show that to emphasize your point and give us an idea of the path forward. That's all. Thank you.
All right. So I have Chris Sutton and Pam. Chris, what's your question?
Yeah, question for Vince. Vince, does M91 deal with the remote handled true that's potentially in the caissons and pipe tubes in 61811? Do you know? Because a lot of that waste came from the 300 area, as I understand it.
Yes, it does. And what that you will see that on the let's see, there's some of these that just complete retrieve, section 3, complete retrieval of remote handled. That's section 3, Ruth, of slide 3.
Okay.
If you go back up to slide 3, it's milestone 49B, says complete retrieval of remote handled RSW by 2048. And so that it does address that, and that's going to be require some facilities. The 300 area remote handled waste was sent to the burial grounds north of the 300 area, but also out to the 200 west as well. And so the answer to your question is yes, M91 does address remote handled, but that's in the future going forward. And it's going to be a challenge and something the RAP committee wants to, we really need a presentation on that. And so Tom, jot that down, a presentation on how to handle a remote handled waste from the caissons. It's out there. We need a facility to deal with it. How are they going to do it? Good question. Thank you.
Okay. Pam and then Larry. And just a note, if you would use the chat to let me know you want to be in queue. Since this is the first time out with Teams, I'm struggling a little to do all of the pieces the first time out, and I'm missing the hand raise piece. Not because I want to ignore you, but I'm not nimble yet. So I've got Pam and Larry in queue.
Okay, thank you. This is really important information and it's alarming, but I think that we need to keep in mind budget constraints. Hanford is getting over $2 billion a year, and we're competing against other sites that have issues like this as well. And the priority has been PFP and getting the waste treatment plant built. And so I think we need to look at this from a prioritization perspective. And we need to keep in mind that that WIP, although the date has been extended to 2050, the new ventilation system is not in yet. It's going to be a couple more years. They're still permitting. And so we've got waste in the central waste complex that has been retrieved. Obviously, we need to be paying attention to those containers, but retrieving waste that doesn't have a place to go isn't the best thought. So, and so for your information, a couple things. We've had another exploding barrel from Los Alamos, and it was metal material that was put into a barrel with HEPA filters. This just happened, and so they've got to deal with that. Didn't explode at WIP, fortunately, but there are like barrels that have been put into WIP. And the other thing is that there's going to be an economic stimulus package put forward by President Biden, and communities like ours have asked for stimulus money to go to the EM program. One of the things that Hanford was able to do with the last round of stimulus money was retrieve transuranic waste very efficiently, gigantic boxes and stuff. And so, you know, if we get the extra money, this is, it's work that's ready to go. And we should monitor that and potentially suggest that if we get extra stimulus money, this would be a good place. Thank you.
All right, Larry.
Thank you very much. Vince, thank you for this great presentation. When I started out at Hanford in 1974, I started out as I guess basically an operator on my way to becoming a certified operator to run the reactor. But part of my duties were to throw things into the trenches there in the 200 West area, as well as the East area where they had trenches. And we were asked not to ask questions about what we were throwing in there. So I'm quite concerned about some of the things that came from the reactors, particularly the N reactor, and that we just put things in there. So I really appreciate your hard work on this. And I think that it deserves an awful lot of examination, if not becoming part of our milestones. Thank you so very much.
Tom, what do you have on your next steps list? It looks like you've been keeping a running tab.
Yeah, so I think the next step is we should bring this forward. If we want to continue having this discussion, part of it during open forum, we can do that. But also when we're looking at the work plan and sort of meeting requests that we have moving forward, you know, I've got quite a list of plutonium topics that we could request a sort of plutonium-centric RAP meeting in the future. We'll make sure it's on the work plan and for next year. And I just really appreciate, can't say how much I appreciate the work that went into this presentation. So thank you, Vince, and the rest of the IM team. So let's do a 15-minute break. Well, let's do 17 minutes just to be so 10:45 coming back, and we'll talk about DOE's response to Advice 308.
Right.
Okay. 15 minutes.
Hello, Ruth.
Yeah.
This is Tom Galliotto. I just joined in a few minutes ago by phone. My computer's in the computer shop, but I'll go ahead and rejoin at 10:45 or so when the break is over. But I will be only on the phone. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
And go out. Hmm?
Okay, so it's 10:45. We're running about half an hour behind schedule, so let's see if we can make up some time, or I don't know if anybody has availability to hang out a little bit later than 12:30. We can maybe try to let the room stay open if that's a possibility. But wanted to make sure we talk about um, DOE's response to HAB advice. Typically, we would do that at the full board, but we didn't have an opportunity to do last full board meeting. So we got a response to the advice that Jam was the IM team lead on for B plant, non-time critical removal action, and just wanted to talk through and see whether we have anything we want to talk to the EIC about with response, whether it sort of ticks all the boxes we were looking for, whether there's any clarifications we need to request. I sent out an email with sort of the criteria that's supposed to be followed by tri-party agencies when they're responding to advice, and also advice 100, which laid out sort of how the board expects the response to be. My own cursory review, the only questions I really have for those check marks are on advice point 2. And I was wondering if anyone else had any other comments, or whether we could ask the regulators whether they have any thoughts on the response. Just wanted to have sort of a mini open forum on this to see if there's anything I want to take to that you want Jan and I to take to the EIC in preparation for June's full board meeting. So I see Vince is in the queue.
Am I on now?
Yep.
I was greatly disturbed by the response. It's an embarrassment to DOE. That response is not what I would expect from DOE. If they believe that grouting the filter system is safe, and that's all they did say. They said, oh, it's fine, don't worry. No, wait a minute. That's totally ignoring our point, which was you haven't shown any scientific information that what you're doing will not alter the final remediation. And they're arguing, well, we don't know what the final remediation is. Well, guys, don't go in there screwing it up with grout if you don't have a future plan. That should be and that's essentially what our advice said. And it's completely, because I've been in a laboratory dealing with this kind of situation where I was asked to develop processes to recover material one way or another. And so you didn't proceed with putting grout in something unless you had laboratory tests. And the fact that a filter system, and you understand the filter system on your home furnace, is somewhat similar to a building and stuff where the filters are packed tight. And so what are you going to accomplish by putting grout on? Are you going to take the steel container off the top and 3 feet of soil, and then you're going to pour grout on top of the soil? I mean, on top of the filters, and then put the soil back in the steel container? What have you gained? So there's this whole thing is totally unacceptable, and I just don't know what I'm hope that, Tom, that we can have discussion about this, the concept of grouting for stability. Thank you.
I definitely hear that. I was more uncomfortable with the response to this advice until the action memo got released this morning or distributed, and there's a comment response section in there. And some of the other responses that DOE had to public comment about grouting were that there's going to be an evaluation engineering study to look at other flowable fills other than grout, which, you know, I would feel more comfortable filling this with sand or gravel to prevent a collapse. That's easy to vac out, and you can, you know, it won't be as quote unquote permanent as the grout. So I feel like that's something that was missed in this response, where, you know, it was automatically knee-jerk grout is good, where it could have been, you know, something to fill the space to prevent a collapse is good. So a little subtlety. I was wondering, do we have anyone from EPA on that had any thoughts about the response to advice point 2? Is it acceptable under CERCLA to interim stabilize something with grout prior to characterization? Just that's the only part, you know, response aside and tone aside, that was one that really makes me scratch my head.
Well, this is Craig Cameron from EPA. Keep in mind this is an ecology regulatory lead, but since you're asking EPA, I guess I'll say a few things. That's all right. So, you know, I think the questions your folks are raising are legitimate. I'm glad that they took a look at other kinds of fill that would not tend to tie our hands on what the future remedial action would look like. I definitely want things to be done safely, and I know they kind of have to do things in stages, but not, you know, not affecting the future remedy is important, and also not doing something just so you can change the waste designation or hope that you're changing the fate of whatever is in the filters is something that should also be avoided. And my suggestion to ecology is to not allow, you know, not allow that to be changed. And I think folks need to prove, if it's not greater than Class C, then they need to prove that it isn't, and they shouldn't be trying to apply the weight of the grout toward making it not, you know, designate as something.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't realize EPA was or ecology was lead on this one. Ecology, do you have any response as well?
This is Ginger. I don't know if I can't tell if John Temple is on, and he said they did have similar concerns when they initially reviewed the ECA. DOE made the case for needing to stabilize the HEPA filters and that it will not affect future disposition. They closed the comment. We closed the comment out. So apparently we agreed with that. But I don't know if John is on because there's a bunch of people on the phone and I can't tell who they are. So John, speak up if you're here.
The only people I have on the phone are Tom Galeotto and Stan Branch, unless someone has snuck in and is just listening on us.
Okay. So I guess this is a really short conversation. I appreciate everybody humoring me. It sounds like this is something we should bring to the EIC for discussion at the full board in June. I don't know what precedent there is for the HAB requesting clarification from a response to advice, but at least having that conversation might be important.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yeah.
This is Tom Gowder. Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt. I fully understand the concerns raised here about the use of grout in a number of different cases to minimize risk and to more stabilize the waste in question. I will, speaking as a RAP member, but also as a BCC member involved with a number of different recent advices to DOE, I'm actually envious of the response that you got on 308 from the standpoint of actual responses from DOE to each individual item that you had highlighted in the advice. We often have not gotten that, and I see that as at least one positive from the response that you received. Thank you.
I definitely appreciate that perspective, and I am appreciative that we got a response to the advice in a timely manner. We are still waiting on some other ones back from 2019 even. So yeah, I do appreciate the response is timely, and it does at least address each of the points individually. And I feel like it was missing a little bit extra about the engineering report that's going to be done about the alternatives to grout. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Ruth.
So I have a suggestion. Steve Wigman is in queue. We've got two folks who, this is awkward. We're online and there's not a table, right? But both Esteban and McClure have things they want to add to this conversation. So I'm going to suggest that we go to Steve as a member of the committee and then open this topic for a little bit of public comment so that we can bring in Esteban and McClure. It's just a new question we have. What do you think?
And just that sounds like a plan. And then if you're not on the committee currently, make sure you just preface your statement by member of the public or whatever role you're serving, not as a board member. So Steve.
Yes, thank you. The conversation you just had brings a point that I think we should discuss at the EIC and maybe even the leadership meeting, and that is, how can we aspire to advice and responses that are complete, in the sense that we often submit advice that may surprise the agencies, and then we get a response that surprises us. And I would like to see if there's some way we can pursue conversation around the content of our advice and their likely response so that we minimize surprises. I don't know how best to do that, but I think that we need to advance our ability to submit advice and get responses that are fully understandable.
I hear you, Steve. I do think that the process we have allows the tri-party agencies a chance to review the advice before it goes to the full board, because the committee reviews it and approves it, and that's part of the process. So I don't see anyone getting caught flat-footed. I just I'm all for opening lines of communication. I just wondering how that changes the process. So definitely a conversation for the EIC. Okay, so we have two public comments on this topic, and then we'll move on to and Chris Sutton. Let's do Chris first, and then the two public comments.
Chris?
Yeah, this is kind of responding to Steve Wegman's comment here about maybe how to improve not being surprised by responses and not having the regulatory agencies respond surprised by our advice. And I was thinking about what Tom said in his email about pondering things over the weekend to make things better. And I decided that I didn't really understand what policy level advice and policy level recommendations meant. And I'm not sure that some of the advice, so I looked up policy online and in dictionaries, and I'm not sure that some of our advice would be considered policy level. And I think it's good. It represents concerns that the HAB has, but concerns are not the same as policy level advice, I don't think. They can be, but not necessarily are. So my thought on this, and maybe you could take this to the leadership board, Tom, is I think it would be handy, especially for new members, if maybe the HAB leaders and DOE and regulatory leaders put out a couple examples. They could all pretend they're the HAB and put out a couple examples of what they consider to be policy level advice that maybe we could use to make sure that our advice is policy level, as well as representing concerns that we have. That's just a comment I have.
Great, thank you for that.
I don't, should I like mute folks? I can't figure out what the tapping is.
Hello?
Yeah, let's go with I guess Esteban, you're up.
All right. This is Esteban Ortiz, member of Green Latinos in the Public. And I think with all this and the big thing, self-awareness, that I think it keeps popping up during this time of essence. To me, June is like, man, we're already going to be half of the year. Second, I think it's been mentioned before. Personally, I was working for a nonprofit science organization in DC. When I moved out here, I live in Richland now. And the big thing, that big complaint always that I think, based on what Chris just mentioned, that DC folks are the policy oriented. And I think seeing how the federal organizations that are involved in this, and also being aware that the prior administration, one of the big jobs that we had to do was try to get the science into policy, which was a problem. And now with this new administration, I don't think it's going to be such a huge problem. But yet, how do we translate that? What Vince, what Chris, and I think what Tom going out to the to the folks is, this is what we're seeing here on the ground, and me more being as a field person, this is what we're seeing, and this is the whole purpose of the whole boards, versus what you folks out in DC are seeing. And this is where I guess communication gets lost in translation. And I think that's where things, especially with the scientists, believe me, working with scientists, I think I was the outreach coordinator for the science organization, trying to gather the lobbyists, the scientists, everybody. That was the biggest thing, trying to have everybody communicate at the same level. Like I said, the biggest thing with policy folks, which DC folks claim to be, that, that's their gibberish versus us regular folks out here in the wild. That's my comment.
Thank you. McClure?
Haven't heard your name in a long time, McClure.
Hey, Ruth. Hey, Tom. McClure Tosh. I work for Yakima Nation ERWM. I'm the Natural Resource Injury Assessment Lead. And two things. One, so fine to note that this is like the public or whatever, but that gets a little awkward sometimes for tribal employees because we're often trained that we're not part of the public or whatever. But for this purpose, that we're not at the table, I'm not a board member, all that. Understand. I just wanted to note that for kind of a awkward kind of terminology. But then on this specifically, Yakima Nation did submit our own comments on the ICA for the bee plant non-time critical removal action. And we went maybe a little bit less technical and more legal on our thoughts on this grouting. And we are supposed to have a meeting with DOE on this sometime soon, I hope. But the thing I just wanted to point out for people to be aware of is that under the federal law and the National Contingency Plan, there is specific language in there that talks about how your early actions or your removal actions or steps done early on are supposed to not preclude or get in the way of what you do for your final cleanup action. And so while it's technically true that grouting itself can be removed if it needs to be removed and things like that, you have basically changed the waste form to just increase in volume astronomically. And there's only so much permitted space available in facilities that I'm afraid that we're grouting so much with these early actions, removal actions, interim actions, that by the time we get to final remedies, it will be technically infeasible to have the space for that stuff to be disposed of because there's just not enough permitted space available in the United States. And that's really something that's very concerning. And I think everyone knows that Yakima's goal is to have this place is cleaned up, back to the way it was. And obviously that's a very aspirational goal, but grouting things in place and making it impossible to move it or technically infeasible later is very concerning. So just wanted to put that out there and note that for folks to help in your thinking on this topic. Thank you.
Right.
Definitely appreciate that perspective. If I recall, during the advice construction, we started off from the legal front and then went sort of more broader and tried to get more policy level and less technically, sort of jargony there, which there's a place for that. But yeah, and appreciate you shining there. Okay. So I've got some talking points to bring to the EIC. Chris, that was the idea of having sort of a mock HAB from the TPA agencies is sort of fun. So have the TPA agencies write what they think is policy level advice so we can see where the disconnect is. I like that idea. And I'll just bring that there's a little bit of discontent with the with the response. I think I hear sort of begrudging acceptance, but that's where we'll go with that. I think we can bring this up more in the last section of the discussion, but I just wanted to make sure the topic was discussed a little bit since we didn't get to discuss it at the full board. Okay. I think open forum is next. And I have something that I wanted to bring up that I heard at the PIC meeting. So I'm going to take my chair prerogative and jump in front of Q, and I apologize for doing this. I'll try not to do it often. So PIC is working on advice on sort of how documents get added to the tri-party agreement and communicated to the public. And it includes something that the technical aspect of is RAPs. And that is the Central Plateau Inner Area Principles and Procedures, I think it is. It includes the Rascal teams that are new, which is Representative Analog Site Characterization something. If someone can look up that acronym, that would be awesome.
This is Craig Cameron. It's Representative Analogous Site Coordinating Agency Liaisons. I came up with the. I should work for NASA. I came up with the acronym.
Craig, would you type that in the chat for us, please?
Sure.
It is a great acronym, and I think that there was this document originally came before the public and the board in 2016, and the HAB issued advice on it. Got a response. The only part of the new stuff that got added to the TPA was that Rascal section. So I would like to have the RAP get a briefing on that and on the inner area principles. We've requested it a couple times. And I know there's energy about having RAP involved with this advice in particular. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable bringing, information to the advice other than as a PIC member, because we haven't gotten a technical briefing on it yet. But I welcome the discussion. If anyone from the RAP wants to join the IM team, it is still going, and definitely contact Jeff Burright and Pam and Ruth, sorry, to join that IM team and get involved in the conversation. The allergies are really hurting me today, and my brain is a cloud, so I apologize in advance. So, but it is something that there is energy on, and I do think that it will eventually lead to advice, technical advice, but the advice that PIC is working on is not technical in nature. It is more, how do you communicate to the public, which is sort of what PIC does, right? So anyone, that's my first salvo in the open forum, and if anyone has anything to say about that, chime in, and if not, then we can move on to the next subject, whoever wants to say something.
So I did in the email for this meeting, that draft advice that's being worked on by PIC is part of that document list. So if your curiosity is great, you have the most updated words to my knowledge.
This is Vince Panesco. I would like to add to what you just said. The PIC's concept is that DOE is not providing us with enough information. They could do a lot better job. And in terms of the RAP advice, along the same line, is that there are a number of documents that our DOE publishes annually. And you know what they are, the groundwater report, the environmental monitoring report, the update on the composite analysis is an annual requirement. If you want the HAB members to be educated about what's going on at Hanford, DOE once a year would take some of these documents, and it might be just one full meeting, and might be the full HAB, but let's say there's just focus on the RAP for now, and present the results, the new results out with talking points, with handouts, one-page handouts. If the theory is that Hanford HAB members are supposed to go back to their organizations with information. DOE should be helping us, giving us information, and keeping us updated as the new documents come out, and so that we can go forth and spread that information to the public. It's not been happening. And so I still think there's room even for the RAP to make a device similar to what the PIC is doing now. And it might even be a PIC RAP, might be a committee of the whole kind of thing, where DOE improves their system, their policies for educating HAB members and keeping HAB members fully informed. Thank you.
And to follow up, I mean, this topic, this inter-area principles, does fit in with the committee of the whole that we agreed on last year, and we're hoping to have scheduled, which is sort of in-use scenarios and that type of thing. So in states. So maybe that is a document that comes out of an IAN team that comes out of the committee of the whole. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Does anyone else have any open forum discussion points?
This is Vince again. Sorry I didn't use the cue, but we talked earlier in terms of open forum on the composite analysis and the importance that has leading towards in-state analysis. And it's interesting that, and I'll just pick one bone out of the composite analysis. There's a series of documents supporting that, the current update to the composite analysis, which we were told once upon a time was going to be 2020, and then it got shifted. I don't know what it is now. We haven't had an update. We've been asking for an update. In theory, there's supposed to be a new update to the composite analysis on an annual basis. And I haven't seen the most recent one of this. But anyhow, I'm still looking for that presentation, Tom, to the RAP committee. And so that's one topic, because one of the things they said was, well, plutonium, yeah, we're not going to include plutonium as an issue, long-term issue, because plutonium has a high coefficient of distribution, doesn't move through the soil. It's solid, stays oxide, doesn't move. Well, you know, we dig into the burial ground where plutonium is sitting, and yeah, we put liquids in there. There are liquids in burial ground, plutonium, and we did put millions of gallons of plutonium waste as organic into the ground that went shooting down through the soil. And so this whole concept of the composite analysis right now is ignoring plutonium is something that we ought to really be concerned about. So we need that is on our list as an open forum, going path forward, get that composite, get DOE to talk to us about where they are on that composite analysis, what's the schedule, and give us an opportunity to ask questions about this, some of the assumptions they're making. That's one topic. The second topic is, Ruth, can you bring that, that email I sent you, can you put that on the screen?
I can. Okay, give me a sec. I had it here just. I had it here a minute ago. Oh, it's under, sorry. Here we go. Yes, things are going to get more nimble, I promise. I'm just not there yet. There you go.
Okay, the purpose of this, this came out of a document I came across it. You can see the reference on top. But this gives you the idea of where plutonium is and amount and rough amounts. These numbers are approximate numbers. And I was quite surprised that U.S. Ecology had 143 kilograms of plutonium sitting there. I wonder where that came from. The point is that there's the big picture of where all this material is at Hanford and DOE's plans for removing it is done piecemeal, and individual documents that don't link to each other. And this is back to the M91 concern that the Hanford advice, previous advice in 2015 came up with, the global continuity or the holistic picture of plutonium. And so an open forum topic is looking at the total inventory, and this is 2009. I don't know that it changed a whole lot. There might be some tweaking here and there, but these are ballpark numbers. And the question is, how does this all come together? And I have never seen a document that looks at this big picture. And here's this table gives you something to start with on that, Tom. Any comments on this? Well, that's all I had to say on the subject. I think it's a topic that ought to be looked at on our one of our future lists in terms of open forum topics.
All right, I have folks in queue. I have Chris Sutton, Liz, and Shelley. Chris.
I'd like to follow up on Vince's comments, request for briefing on composite analysis. I'd like to see that combined with the briefing on a cumulative impact evaluation, because as I understand it, the software that's being developed or has been developed, the modeling software, kind of is being used for both radioactivity on one hand and chemical hazards on the other. So maybe the request for a briefing could combine the composite analysis and the cumulative impact evaluation. That's my comment.
All right.
And for context, we would typically, what I'm trying to do is get a briefing in October on all things groundwater, including the annual report, annual groundwater monitoring report, the CIE, and the composite analysis, and then maybe a discussion from PNNL on the carbon tetrachloride optimization as well. So let's see if we can get that on the books and inked in, and I think it's a great idea.
Liz, you're up.
I hear that woodpecker again. I like the idea of having the, and I know I've been trying to get the cumulative impact analysis and the composite analysis on the agenda for a while. I'm wondering if as part, it's come up in conversations recently, and it's not my idea, so I don't want to claim it, but other people might have more reference for it. The idea of talking about what is the total, like when we talk about end states, what's the total like risk budget that we're working with, that we can like, this is how much we can leave on site, and then inventorying against that. So it's tied to those tools. But I'm just curious if does that exist, or is that really just an idea? Does anyone know? Like, we can't leave more than this on site, and so we have to work back from that. I mean, I know it's complicated because you have to define which contaminants you're leaving, but as we're dumping things in ERDF and having some of these more permanent disposal sites, is there a place they're being inventoried? so that there is a place to look? Or is that in the composite analysis? Does anyone know?
This is Vince Panesco. It's buried in the initial performance assessment or initial composite analysis back in '98 and updated in the early 2000s. And then buried in the EIS. It's buried in such a way that the average person can't open it up and find it. That's the problem. And you would really like to see something simple. And back in the 90s, 1995, I gave some presentations to DOE on the subject of just what you're talking about, what the total budget was, and we were over that budget. In other words, other people have argued, no, we're not, and then it's gone back and forth over the last 20, 30 years as to whether we're over that budget or not. And what's missing is some sort of a simple overview document that provides this. And again, this is where maybe the HAB should be making policy advice on big picture type analysis or documents that give us a view of, Liz, of just what you asked. Please put that out. In other words, our policy to DOE should be, please put that out in information in a way that people can understand. Where are we with respect to that budget, that safety budget or risk budget? And what do we know for sure? Because if we are currently over that risk budget, we're not supposed to be taking any action that makes it worse. We're supposed to be taking action to make it better, reduce the offsite contamination. And we can't be just throwing things in ERDF and willy-nilly if indeed there's going to be a problem, long-range problem. But we got to be able to prove that. And somehow I'm not satisfied that we're actually proving all of that in a way that the public can understand. So yeah, there's some work to be done on this topic.
And then I just had one more comment, thanks Vince, about just in case people didn't know, I think at one point there was going to be a presentation at the RAP meeting on the topic, on the comment period that's closes at the end of the month for the engineering evaluation cost analysis on proposed alternatives for 200 West area tier 2 building structures, buildings and removal action. So there's a public meeting online on April 20th, next Tuesday at 5:30. And the information's on hanford.gov. And so I just wanted to give a shout out for, I had requested that there be a public meeting on that topic to provide more information and opportunity for Q&A. And just want to thank DOE for making that happen. And then the comment period ends on the 30th of April.
We haven't traditionally put public meetings in the weekly update. That's not to say we couldn't. We just haven't done it historically. Josh, will you flag that and we'll stick it in this week's thing?
Will do.
Josh is handling all things writing and admin this week, and he's a lifesaver. So I've got Shelley and Chris in queue. Shelley.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Liz, thanks for pointing out that ECA comment period. Really appreciate that. And Ruth, I really like the idea and your response of putting that into our, it's not being called events at a glance anymore, is it? It's got a new name, but whatever that document is that goes out to everybody that tells us where we are in the course of a month, it'd be great to have those comment periods listed in there so that people who are new and those of us that are needing better tracking ability can do that. That would be great. I really liked what Vince had to say, what everyone's had to say about trying to get us in, trying to build our knowledge base. And in thinking about that, I would really like to hear from all of the TPA agencies, what their needs are from the board and how they might support the building of our knowledge base and also our ability to address the issues that they think are important for us to take a look at, especially in terms of building public information and then also planning for the comment periods. If I thought that the intent of DOE planning to build into our agendas some tutorials was a great idea. And that if DOE can't build the board's understanding, better build it, then it really sets the board on a course of failure because we will miss the mark with our advice if we don't understand the lay of the land on site and what those benchmarks are for reaching, any kind of success, milestone or otherwise. So to that end, I really think we need to start focusing more on tutorials and how to navigate getting, one of them could be how to navigate getting documents that we need. It's not innate. It's a tough thing to navigate and get documents, and people need to understand that process. You need to know that there's something there that you can look for first. So building some kind of tutorials that helps us navigate getting documents other than Vince's basement or garage, wherever he's got that stash of information. That needs to happen. The Phoenix platform is a platform that's been developed on site that really is very layered and complex and not just descriptive, but visual about groundwater and our plumes and where things are on site. And it's time, I think, again, to do another tutorial on that. I think that would be really important to help folks understand the site more comprehensively. I'm a real visual person. I like maps, and the Phoenix platform's really cool. And it's not that hard to navigate. I think the other thing that is very, well, not think, I believe it's really important for us to understand the permitting process that the Department of Energy goes through to get work on the site permitted through Ecology's permitting process. I'd like to hear about that and understand that better. I think that permitting process is a real benchmark for us understanding how DOE and the regulatory agencies are moving through the process of getting work done and getting us up to through startup and operations for the facilities that are coming online. So I'd like to hear about that. I think that's it for now. But those are some of my off the cuff thoughts. Thanks.
All right. Chris Sutton, I have you in queue.
Yes, I thought maybe my comment on topic should be deferred to the next section, but actually following up on what Shelley said, I think it's worth having right now. With a lot of new people coming into the HAB and new ones that aren't quite there yet, maybe it'd be worthwhile having a tutorial on the CERCLA process, because it's a pretty formal process that you go through with a large number of documents that follow one after another, some of which have public comment periods, some of which don't. But a lot of time and effort is spent on the documents and on the CERCLA process. So maybe it'd be worthwhile having a discussion on the CERCLA process. And as part of that, how does the RCRA process differ from the CERCLA? Because there are analogous steps in both of them, but there are differences as well. And maybe that would be a really good tutorial topic to have somewhere down the road. That's it.
I think I recalled Jerry mentioning that he had a lecture that he gave for environmental law students about just that. So that might be worth, if my memory's right, then it might be worth resurrecting that. And I think he said that he had presented it at the board before. So might be worth looking into. Great idea.
Ruth, this is Tom Galliotto. Could you put me in queue, please?
You have it. What's on your mind, Tom?
Oh, wow, that was quick. In the interest of sharing thoughts and concerns about RAP-related cleanup issues, I know we have, the HAB has a current IM team working on Hanford end states, meaning not end state contracting, but end states for Hanford cleanup. And to me, that is a critical area for increased attention, not only for the HAB overall, but for the RAP specifically, because a lot of the low-level waste repository material will be coming from Central Plateau and other areas of Hanford and deposited in what, in essence, would be the domain of the RAP, in my opinion. I don't know if the PIC or the RAP is heading that IM team. I can't recall, and I don't have the list in front of me. But it's an important area because everything that we do on the HAB and in RAP, for example, should be focused on the target of reaching the goal of the final cleanup end state, whatever that is. And we all need to know that. The tribes and the public need to be well informed of what that vision is for the final state of the Hanford cleanup. And I'd really encourage the RAP as well as our individual members to get involved with that. And I think the time is certainly here, if not already late, to be in detail addressing that topic. So thank you.
I think that IM team is actually an EIC IM team for the Committee of the Whole on End States. So
okay.
Yeah, so that is a board-wide topic.
Good.
It's almost I almost want to call it a work group. Issue manager team doesn't quite capture it because it also includes agency folks, which a classic IM team wouldn't. But it's a big bunch of folks.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're making up some time. Do we have any more open forum stuff that is not related to work plan or that type of? Okay, well, I guess, do we want to move forward and talk about committee business, future meeting topics, and our work plan before the EIC workshop?
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to, so I did, the email I sent out talking about sort of our homework, what's broken in the HAB. I just wanted to take a moment and talk through what I see happening and why it's different than what should be happening. In a crazy year, we had a pandemic, everything's remote, nobody knows how to do it. We had a major contract transition, we had minor contract transitions, we have a new DDFO, a new liaison, new board chair, new committee chair, new facilitation contract. Everything that could change this year did. And I'm hoping that the reason our agendas have been sparse and last minute are because of that. I feel like we've gotten a lot done in spite of the challenges. I hold hope that we will get back to business as usual. My part of my goal for this committee is to have agendas that are planned out using the 3-month look ahead or further ahead. So the experts at DOE and EPA and ecology, and maybe, and my dog says hi, maybe some other agents like PNNL or the DNFSB could come and talk about topics that we don't end up having a 3.5-hour meeting of just us talking to each other. Not that I think it's not worth doing, but we need to be informed in order to make decisions and make advice. We're a technical committee. We need those technical inputs. So I think the next couple months we're still working through this transitioning and getting our feet back under us. But starting in June through October, we really need to be back in the practice of actually having agendas that are well thought out in advance and prepared for. And that having been said, what else, other than the agenda process and not getting topics because all hell is broken loose on the planet, what else could we do to improve the board? And I do want to make sure we save time for this discussion, and then also what topics aren't on the work plan that need to be. So with that, I'll open it up. Steve.
One of the issues I've heard people talk about is the fact that it's sometimes difficult in a timing perspective for a committee to get a matter before the full board in order to have a timely action. And I'm wondering if we need to consider some way of committees being able to act in a more timely way without the full board holding them up. And what comes to mind is that we don't have to just give advice. We can provide comments. There's a lot of other avenues we could use. And I'd kind of like to explore the opportunity that could create that would allow a more timely action on the part of committees.
Yeah, and the way that we've done that in the past is if the full board can't reach consensus advice, then each of the individual board members can issue a comment, a public comment. You can have the discussion about what the public comments might be during committee, but it can't be on behalf of the board because it's a consensus board. I guess the question though is, does the board need to comment during public comment windows, or can we take the time to deliberate and comment outside those? Does it cheapen the experience, or is it actually more poignant if we have a comment outside of a public comment window, so we're getting a response that's not part of the comment response package? It's a thought.
And I have heard DOE say a number of times, and the other agencies also, that they will consider our input anytime we provide it. If it's not within their comment period, though, it might be lessened in its impact. I'm just trying to see if there isn't ways that we could empower the committees to not have to wait and not be frustrated by we don't even know how many meetings we're going to have next year, and I've heard we might have fewer. So
yeah,
it's just something that we need to think about how we can work through it, because I know it can be really frustrating, and Tom Galeotto has been pretty eloquent in his expression of frustration over the fact that the board is actually holding him up in some ways. And I'd like to work on getting through that.
And I think it comes down to scheduling and planning. If we know when the public comment periods are going to be, and we have a commitment that we get briefs in a timely manner, then we have time to do our work, at least the wrap, because we get more meetings than most. It's different with the other BCC in particular. Sometimes it's hard to get meetings, but it's definitely a two-way street. We have to know what's coming down the pike, and we have to know that we're going to get a briefing on it so we can have this type of discussion.
So I was going to try to tap into Shelley's years on the board. I have memories of either issues on which there was not consensus. There were multiple perspectives, and times when the timing was tight in terms of trying to meet a deadline, where the product of either a board meeting or a committee meeting was literally a round robin or a sounding board. And so you'd go around the room and everyone would have their chance to say whatever they thought about that issue, whatever it was. And then the facilitation team, and I'm remembering back when I worked for Enviro Issues, we would lift that round robin, that sounding board, out of the meeting minutes, and that would be what would be given to the agencies. So it wasn't a representation of consensus or agreement. It was a representation of the perspectives in the room that day on that issue. We're now recording committee meetings and board meetings. That gives us the opportunity, courtesy of technology, to literally have a transcript of a round robin. So there's not a reframing of anybody's words.
Do you want me to jump in, Ruth, here?
Yeah, if you want to. I mean, I don't know if people have done that in the interim, but I do remember doing that in the past. And if that would help with the timing crunch, I'm offering that. But Shelley, you remember better than I.
You're right. The agencies have actually come to us in the past and said, we need something now. We need to hear from you now. Would you be willing to entertain the idea of a round robin? And we did do that. And I remember it very well up in Seattle. We did that I think in Bellingham at a meeting there. And EPA had asked for that to happen. So I think that that's a really good utilization of time, especially when we've got the agency's ears, everyone's hearing it. I like the idea that it's being recorded and we get people's comments verbatim. And I think that's something we can talk about through the EIC and at the leadership workshop in terms of how we construct what gets, other options for getting advice or perspectives to the agencies. So thanks for that reminder. I had forgotten about that.
I'm just grateful that there's recording now, because doing transcripts when you're just taking hand notes is a different deal.
Yeah, and recently, we did the sticky notes on the storm board that got submitted as part of the public record as well. So, that is the same type of thing, maybe a little less formal, but I think there's a place for that. So anything else from the committee members that aren't on the EIC that they want Jan and I to bring to the EIC workshop in a couple weeks? And then maybe we can move on to the work plan after that.
Well, this is Vince Pedesco. I think this idea.
Yeah, go ahead.
The idea of training and getting documents once a year, some sort of tutorials on where we stand, and actually passing in talking points out, pages on groundwater, a page on groundwater, a page on environmental monitoring, a page on pump and treat, so that members of the HAB can go out and represent pass this information on to the communities that they represent. That's something that I think the leadership thing should focus on. Getting a smarter HAB membership. Thank you.
And for those of you who are new to the board, I realize that I'm throwing out terms. The leadership workshop is an annual meeting of the EIC, the Executive Issues Committee, which is made up of the chair and vice chair of all the committees of the board, and the national liaison, to talk through what the work plan for the board's going to be, and work on the calendar, and then sort of board-wide topics of interest and concerns. So that's happening the week after next, and Jan and I are going to be representing the RAP on that, in that workshop. So this is your chance to have your voice heard by and make decisions for how the board's going to react, or how the board's going to operate next year. So just a little bit of background in case you missed it.
The leadership workshop are the yellow dates on the calendar. Tom Galeotto or anybody on the phone, do you want to jump in? I can't see if your hands are up.
This is Tom. No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is, we have two different work plans right now. One is the full board work plan that got approved out of last year's leadership workshop. And then the other is the RAP work plan that we've been slowly and surely adding to, and I think has 28, now 29 or 30 topics on it, and 18 of those have framing questions already to go. I want to make sure that all of the topics that are on our work plan end up on the final work plan for the board, and make sure that I'm not missing anything that you guys think are going to be important to talk about next year that's not on there. So if you've had a chance to look over our work plan, I think it got emailed to you yesterday. Anything else that is missing that is a conversation you think needs to happen in the next year, I think is important to add.
So for folks who are new, the anatomy of the committee work plan, it's literally a melding of what used to be called the 3-month look ahead with a topics table, and different committees use those two documents differently. So the front page is sort of the snapshot of what's coming in the next few months. And then each topic has its own little space where it's got framing questions, a name, if they're upcoming dates, public comments, products that the board thinks it wants to produce around it. Products can be advice, white papers, sounding boards, those sorts of things. And so the RAP, don't tell any of the other committees I said this, but the RAP has the most complete work plan in terms of topics and framing questions and describing what are the things you're interested in. But don't tell the other committees I said that. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble with Vic.
I think most of the other chairs of the other committees are on this meeting, so you just let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, I just hugged it.
So while we're talking about our agenda and our work plan for the next year, do we, Gary, do you have an idea of when we might be getting the agency's draft agenda? I mean, traditionally we would bring that draft to this meeting so we could talk through it as a committee. We're sort of having to piecemeal it this year because of all the crazy transitions and pandemics and all that. But do we have a timeline on that?
Yes, Tom, this is Gary. I think you'll see a draft probably within the next week or two.
Okay. Hopefully within the next week, because 2 weeks is the leadership workshop. So just put that out there. Okay, so we have our committee agenda, our committee work plan, and as you can see, it's a pretty extensive list.
It's only 13 pages.
It's only 13 pages, I know.
Only 13.
One thing that I do want to make sure we add here is this CERCLA and RECRA discussion.
Circular RECRA process.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Craig Cameron. I don't know if it's kosher for me to chime in, but
by all means.
A few years ago, John Price and I, as well as, and I can't remember the person right now, but a DOE person that deals with the EIS aspects of Hanford, presented a, well, we did a presentation on a PowerPoint on RCRA, CERCLA, how they compare, and also NEPA. So, you know, we'd be probably willing to dust that off, and you know, I was thinking maybe I could check with Emmy and Laura who you know, teach it to other EPA people, so I'd make sure that we were, you know, maybe as accurate as we could be. But that presentation had been reviewed by our attorneys. We had special language at the beginning that said, you know, this isn't totally representative EPA, blah, blah, blah. We had some kind of disclaimer on it, you know, but we gave the presentation, and people seem to appreciate it. And I don't know if maybe that might be helpful again or not, but.
It's a good presentation if folks haven't seen it.
Anyway, just offering that we could update that and send it out, or provide it at a meeting, future meeting.
Yeah, I think it'll be good if we can work these 101s in sort of if we have light meetings, or if there's nothing time critical, to be able to make sure we're keeping our knowledge base on these crazy acronyms.
And then there was the general
Plutonium Day, the day of true. Well, okay, so we have Chris, who wanted to talk about agenda topic 8 on the committee work plan, and then Steve Wigman and Q.
Yes. Agenda topic number 8 says Central Plateau characterization. And under the framing questions and background notes and everything else, it's basically blank. But this deals with milestone M15 partially, and all the characterization associated with the burial grounds and operable units discussed in M15. And I think it fits in nicely with Vince's presentation today on plutonium and M91, because a lot of that is in burial grounds. So maybe that Central Plateau characterization could be moved up a bit or emphasized, because right now, as I look at that 10-year plan that DOE put out, they're not going to get around to characterizing any of those burial grounds under M15, maybe until the 1930s somewhere. And those are major efforts. So the final RIFS reports may not be available till the late 30s or even early 40s. But I pet peeve of mine, or a pet interest of mine, is to try and get those done a heck of a lot sooner. So maybe this is an agenda topic that we could flesh out and push a little bit with the agencies. That's it.
Great. Steve.
So, yeah. Wigman.
Oh, okay. Just a comment that the tutorials on RECRA and CERCLA and NEPA, the whole board would benefit from that. So it could either be on a board agenda or everybody could be notified to listen in when you actually have that presentation. Because I think that the whole board needs to understand the context within which this cleanup is being done. That's all.
Yeah, this is Craig. I think last time around it was given to the whole board, judging by the title on the presentation.
All right. McClure, thank you for the alternate words, just calling it non-table instead of public or stakeholder. I was struggling with the words.
Sure, no problem. And I'm not going to make a big deal about it. So McClure, Yakima Nation, ERW, I'm not on the board, or the table. But on this topic, I just wanted to offer, if folks are interested. So in my previous job for Yakima Nation and Fisheries, I worked on lots of other CERCLA sites up and down the Columbia River, Portland Harbor, and Holden Mine up in Lake Chelan. But I've given presentations with the regulators on the tribe's role in the CERCLA process, because that often mystifies people. And so I would be willing to do that if folks wanted that. So I just wanted to put it out there as an offer.
I think the more
that would be great.
The more we understand about the tribe's perspectives, the more knowledgeable we are in how we do our job. So I would welcome that.
What else?
Okay. Is there anything else that's missing from our list that, you know, something, the hairs on the back of your neck are sticking up about a topic that, you know, might be slipping through the cracks? Mixing metaphors.
Holy cow, they put in NERDA and with NEPA, CERCLA, RCRA, and oh my gosh.
Okay.
So do you want me to work with Jan and Tom to use these topics here and on the look ahead to craft a May draft agenda for you? Emphasis being on draft. That's typically what I do, but I don't know if that's what you want me to do.
I think we know that, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but 324 will be right for May.
We're expecting that. That's correct.
Okay. And EPA in their full board agency update mentioned that they were going to be talking about the K basin or 100K treatment study in May. I think that is those two things are important and good briefs if we could get those two. And then Jan and I can provide an update of what happened at the EIC leadership workshop. And May is only a month away, so we're sort of identifying by the seat of our pants. I don't think we have any M91 work identified at this point.
No, I didn't hear it. Is the K-Basin garnet filter media removal, is that part of the 100K treatment study? I'm pretty sure I typed that as someone was talking, and I honestly don't remember the specifics.
I thought it was more on the soil flushing, but
Oh, you're right. No, I think you're right.
Okay, and then we have our perennial ERDIF request. We have a PRP update. Gary, is that too much to ask, or is that going to be ripe as well?
I'm sorry, could you say again your question?
Oh, the PRP progress, even if it's just someone coming and saying it started again, or
I will check on May, but I do believe we've got that not too far down the road.
Okay. PRF is a subset of PFP, so they're both the same thing.
No, when you said PRP, I thought I was thinking more CIRCLA PRP as opposed to PFP. Sorry.
Sorry, PFP. Sorry, my allergies are getting me again. Okay, so I think May has got a lot of topics, and hopefully we can get 2 or 3 of those in. We've got a pretty good list to bring to the leadership workshop. I'm just going through my checklist here. I've got a list of questions for the leadership workshop from the RAP. I don't think of anything else that I have on my list. Does anybody else want to say anything? Thoughts, deep philosophizing?
Well, this is Vince Benasco. I just put on the chat in terms of M91, you were saying that there was no topics carried over. I would just add that we would really like to have a presentation on what the thinking is for new facilities. Is this something that, and I don't know what kind of a policy issue it is, other than we're going to deal with remote handled TRU and large box TRU. We got chunks of stuff out there like the glove boxes and stuff like that, and large process equipment. That's a question. We really like to have a presentation on how are they going to clean that up, and how are they going to actually they're going to cut it up in pieces and ship it to WIP, or is that stuff going to be buried in ERDIF, just moved to ERDIF? I don't know. That'd be a topic that I think follow up on M91, as well as what Jerry Paulette brought up in terms of let's get if there's leaking containers at the central waste complex, get them out faster. What's preventing DOE from doing that?
Yeah, and it wasn't my intent to say we didn't have any follow-up from M91. I was just saying in May in particular, that's sort of the larger planning ahead meeting on plutonium and true waste.
Sure. Thank you.
Liz, you've got a question.
Yeah, I think I just missed the context, Vince, but you were talking about sludge that you had a question about that needed to be dried out and shipped to WIP. Is that captured in the topics we have, or did I hear you correctly?
Well, there's it gets back to that inventory page that we put on the screen before, the plutonium inventory. And section 7 of the PMP addresses all these different topics. And actually there's I forgot to mention, the PMP, if anybody wants a copy of that, send it to Ruth, request to Ruth, and I'll make sure that she has a copy. It's 133 pages. It includes, that's the PMP, that's the September 2020 PMP. It has a lot of background information, and particularly reaching out to all the other milestones. It has an appendix in there that it deals with all the other milestones, the M15, 16, there's some other numbers, dealing with cleanup of plutonium in K basins, Purex, redox, ditches, stuff like that. There's going to be a stream of TRU material generated, and this is all got to be funneled together. So let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm lost now. I just a second lost track of where I was going with this, but yeah,
I think
remind
the
me.
sludge you were talking about was
What was your question, Liz?
the sludge was tank waste, I think, is what
Oh, yeah. Okay.
that needed
Yeah.
to get dried out. Yeah.
That was something, again, we need a presentation. And Tom, maybe this is should be put on there. Well, that's a tank waste kind of thing, though, isn't it? Well, on the other hand,
yeah,
they talk
it's
about
one of those gray areas.
Well, yeah, they talk about not putting this in glass. We all have this perception that we're going to take the single shell tank material, retrieve it, sluice it out, get it into the double shell tanks, and convert it into glass. And at least 10 years ago, I ran across the dock, and so that it's at least that old. It talked about, well, no, all this 20 tanks with sludge with high plutonium content are going to be processed differently, not going into glass. They're going to be processed so they can be shipped to WIP. Well, okay, what is that today? Where's that? That's the question, Tom. What's the plan? Are the facilities, the RAP facilities, and the total plutonium picture here, is that plutonium coming out of tank farms, the single shell tanks, I'm presuming? How does that fit into the RAP issue? And so
yeah, and it gets muddier because WIP has a clause in their operating permit that says they're not allowed to take any tank waste. So that's one of those orphans, right? So
yeah.
That's one thing I do want to get on the books eventually is a joint meeting with tanks, because there are more and more as RAP moves more onto the Central Plateau cleanup, and we get up next to these tank farms and be looking at the soil under the tank farms, and IDF is run by RL, which is typically where RAP works. There's a lot more cross-cutting topics between RAP and tank. So I've been trying to get a meeting that's joint when we can all find a good calendar day for it. But all these other topics keep on popping up that are just as important. So yeah, it is on the long-term look ahead.
The key question is what are the DOE plans to get the plutonium out of the tanks and shipped to WIP?
Bob, are you still here?
I think he might have left.
Oh, okay. It's going to put him on the spot.
Well, there has been no conversation that I can remember over the last several years. And I say the document I looked at talking about recovering the sludge and drying it out, shipping it WIP, that's over 10 years old. So the question is, what's the current plan today? And it didn't come up in the Tank Waste Committee at all. I don't think we've addressed that at all. In other words, is there another avenue for TRU to get out of? You go into glass or go to WIP?
Right. I hear that, and let's add it to the joint tank meeting like Liz is suggesting. I've got a list of topics that I think are good cross cutters, and it's a full day. So it's a full day if we can get presenters. Okay, so it looks like we have a question from the public.
Yes, Esteban Ortiz, Green Latinos member public. In essence of trying to kind of wrapping up, I know we're getting to time is, and I know what Vince and everything. I just, again, repeating I know even the local congressman, Representative Newhouse, just did a piece, or I don't know if he did it. I think it was the Walla Walla or one of the newspapers talking about that, how this cleanup should be a bipartisan issue. And I think several members have called about us being ready in, I think, June. And this is, I think it was mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, how we all should be aware of how this meeting is going to kind of be lining up or the next, what's going to happen. So I think, by June, I think with Tom and everybody's doing, that we'd be ready to go. And and seeing, facilitating any, work that needs to be going, because I think this infrastructure plan is, set to get voted on before a summer recess, I believe. So I think just that, and for us to get all our, X's or dots crossed to say that, hey, here we got, this is we've got planned for you guys, but this is what we need. And I think especially in trying to get all this waste moving and seeing where we're at on that and working on it, especially with, you know, me being new to this, I think what wants to be accomplished to this new, when in June when everything starts rolling.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think if you, Ruth, if you can scroll down, I think we have a topic listed on this work plan that's along the lines of what are the shovel-ready projects. I think Pam originally brought that one up, and it's another great overarching discussion point that, if there's a stimulus that's coming,